And so I've always been a theory why guy. I believe people are not inherently lazy. I do believe that people do have motivations. You just have to sort of tap into whatever triggers that motivation to be successful.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Salisbury, and welcome to another episode of Profiles in Service, a podcast that explores service in all its dimensions: service to our communities, service to the nation, and even service to humanity. For episode 2 today, we'll be continuing our conversation with Tom Deierlein, whom we met in episode 1. So you're a civil affairs officer, you're doing contracting for construction projects, and as you mentioned, you also did some kind of humanitarian work in Baghdad. I think that probably registered and had an impact on you that took you in the direction of where you've gone today. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that, again, when I was there, people don't realize there's a group in the military called civil affairs, and it's less than 2% of the military, and they call it Nonkinetic, right? And just as the name applies, civil, as in civilian, your job is to help protect the civilians that are in the battlefield space. It's not like the Revolutionary War or even World War I or World War II, where armies go into fields and they fight each other and they're all uniformed. Here, people are melting in and out of the population. They were, bombing marketplaces. And then you've got your average Iraqi family that's just trying to put food on the plate and make a living. And I was assigned to Sadr City. And Sadr City is a slum. It's like a 2 mile by 2 mile square. And it's a slum, and it was the worst conditions you can ever imagine, like people living in corrugated tin shacks. It's 125 degrees out, right? And they're like, oh, well, it's the humidity. No, it is not. You stick your head in an oven at 125, I'll tell you, it is boiling hot. And, these families are struggling with food, right? I mean, it was a slum before the war, and now you have the sectarian violence taking place between the Shia and the Sunnis, and it really was just a tough place to live. And so I was really impacted by seeing these children every day. And humanitarian aid is one of the core missions of civil affairs, right? So I was like an executive coach for the newly elected mayor of Sadr City. We were doing microloans and trying to re-stand up factories and small businesses. We were doing essential services, so like sewage, water, electricity, trash, medical, and schools. So we were doing a lot to try and give these folks the capability and capacity to manage and govern themselves. But certainly, as we were moving as a nation forward with that process, in my little area, people were still at the trying to survive stage. So it was great that the Mother Army and the State Department and the Iraqi government were moving towards independence and self-sustaining capacity. We were still in Sadr City dealing with folks that are really struggling. So we started bringing in humanitarian aid whenever we would go on a mission. And we had some humanitarian aid supplies. And then I reached out to some people back in America, and they started shipping me shoes, soccer balls, of course, for the kids. We had Beanie Babies. Children's vitamins, right? You'd see a 9-year-old or 10-year-old girl or boy, and their growth was stunted. They were malnutritioned, so I figured that was one way to try and get some basic nutrition into them. And so I did start to do those things and in fact, I got shot. I got shot in September of 2006. I got shot by a sniper. I was on a mission. I was part of a mission or an operation called Operation Together Forward 2. This is public information. I'm not sharing anything out of school. You could Google Operation Together Forward 2. And it was in summer of 2006, trying to re-secure Baghdad. And it was actually the failure of that mission that led to General Petraeus going to Congress and requesting the surge, which we call. And so during that time, when I got shot, we had been planning a fundraiser with some of my friends from the digital media world, and Bill Flatley at Forbes and Sean Finnegan and Paul Bremer had gotten together to set up this fundraiser that I was going to attend while I was back in New York City at my mid-tour break. Well, I ended up getting shot and was in the hospital, but they went ahead with the fundraiser and they raised like $18,000. And the checks started showing up and they said, Tom Deierlein Foundation, you know? So I had to go and set up a checking account called the Tom Deierlein Foundation and deposited all those checks. And for the first 5 years of the organization, that's what we were focused on, was providing humanitarian aid to children in Iraq and Afghanistan, these innocent children impacted by war, right? These weren't militant kids. These weren't terrorist kids. These were just innocent girls and boys that were trying to, you know, have a basic life. So we started doing a lot of school supplies, again, a ton of clothes, children's vitamins. We shipped over $50,000 of school supplies over that time frame, over $25,000 worth of children's vitamins. And one of the main things that the TD Foundation did during its first 5 years is we would grab children that needed surgery, a lot of heart surgeries. We were partnered with Gift of Life International, Riley's Children's Hospital out of Indiana. So we would grab children out of Iraq and Afghanistan, fly them to Jordan, and give them these life-saving heart surgeries. So that was most of the work for TD Foundation over the first few years. And then in 2013, right, there's no troops anymore in Iraq and Afghanistan, or minimal, right? And most of our effort was mailing it to those folks and they would distribute it. So we pivoted the mission back to children here. And we realized that the children of our wounded warriors and our Gold Star families were struggling.
You actually started this foundation and incorporated it while you were on active duty then?
No, it was a little after, right? So we applied for the IRS early 08. So no, maybe it was 07, but we didn't get approved till 09 officially. So, you know, because it took a while. And I'm sure they, you know, the IRS was like, wait, you're giving aid to Iraq and Afghanistan? Like, wait, time out. You know, but I finally got somebody on the phone. I said, no, look, you know, this is how it works. And I described the operation. And then we did finally get approved.
But you're 100% disabled and medically retired. And now you're looking with some other folks to maybe start a company. And there are provisions for service disabled veterans to get some advantages. And how did you go about founding what became ThunderCat? So
yeah, so I sort of skipped that part of the story. In September of 06, I got shot, and I spent the next 7.5, almost 8 months at Walter Reed, and then the Polytrauma Center in the VA down in Tampa, the spinal cord Polytrauma Center. So I'm an L5-S1 spinal cord injury. I had a sniper shatter my pelvis and the sacrum at the base of my spine. And so yes, I'm a disabled veteran. And when I was doing rehab at Walter Reed, a good buddy of mine, West Point of the class of 90 that served in Berlin with me, and then he had hooked up with some people at a company he and I worked together at. And the guy's name was Doug Dunkel. And he had partnered with a guy named Bob Eiseminger to help start Night Point Systems. And he said, hey, well, we'd like to go visit your buddy. But unlike some other people that used to come and visit, and, you know, and I loved all my visitors, don't get me wrong, but these guys came a few times and they would always bring me like a Panera sandwich and the soup. And then when I started to do my rehab workouts, they came and we did like leg lift contests, you know, and they let me win. But it was fun and we got to know each other. And it turned out that I had known Bob, and because he had been on a soccer team with a buddy of mine way back in the day. So it was all sort of 6 degrees of separation. Well, cut to a year later, And as you pointed out, within the government or federal procurement system, they have set-aside programs. And a set-aside program is for give small businesses a chance. And they have programs for minority, women-owned small businesses, Hub Zone, all these different categories of small businesses, allowing them to compete and win government contracts. They also have one for veterans, or in my case, disabled veterans. And so NightPoint was trying to become a services company, information technology services. But while they were doing all the daily care and feeding of all these data centers, they would say, oh, well, we need 10 more servers, or we need some storage, or can you throw some networking gear on there? Well, all of a sudden, they were becoming too big to be a small services company. And they weren't big because they were selling services. They were big because they were selling products that they weren't even trying to sell. So they reached out to me and we met and discussed. I'm like, why would I want to sell products? So I came in and bought the products group from NightPoint Systems, and it became ThunderCat Technology. My call sign in Baghdad was ThunderCat 6, so hence the name ThunderCat Technology.
Well, you obviously found a pretty good niche, because you don't get to 400 million without really filling real needs. Let's switch gears now for a minute, Tom. You're a proponent of what's called servant leadership, and also of Theory Y as a management philosophy. Could you tell us what these are and why they're important to you?
Yeah, so very early on in the military, you're right, you're taught about the importance of leadership, right? If you think about it, if IBM wants a top executive, or GM or Walmart wants to, they can go raid another organization or even raid a government. But it's not like, you're in the US Army and they're like, oh, look at that hot general in Brazil. Let's get her up here and put her in this role. Or, hey, here's this super hot general in Spain. He's a rocket ship. Let's bring him in and give him the 82nd Airborne. Like, you don't, or even like, oh, here's this Navy admiral. Let's grab him and make him an Air Force general. Like, you don't do that. You have to develop your leaders from within. So from the very first day, a private is striving to be a corporal is striving to be a sergeant is striving to be a platoon sergeant. Officers are striving to lead bigger and bigger organizations. And that means you need to study, understand, and appreciate leadership. So that's the first context that I was given, is that the military is always focused on leaders and leadership development. Think about the military. What do we call it? Being in the service. I was in the service, people say. Now we say I'm a veteran. We don't say that phrase as much anymore. But you're serving your nation. And then about 20, 25 years ago, a book came out called Servant Leaders or Servant Leadership. I'm missing the title. But it's an attitude and it's a behavior, right? You're not the boss. You're not the manager. You're serving others. I work for you. We work together. I work for you. I make sure you have the resources, the training, whatever you need to be successful. In fact, if you look at Frances Hesselbein, who co-wrote that book with Shinseki Be No Do, she's the former CEO of Girl Scouts. She's a Presidential Medal of Freedom winner. Her Twitter handle is "To serve is to live." Mm-hmm. She has embraced that service to others is what leadership is about.
Tell us about Theory Y.
Oh, Theory Y. So again, at West Point, you take psychology or theories of motivation. And was it McGregor? You look at some of these classic folks that studied motivation at the turn of the last century. And there was a guy, I think it was McGregor, that came out and said, well, Theory X and Theory Y. Like, Theory X believes that people will inherently avoid work, or I don't want to say lazy. I don't want to misuse the phrase, right? Theory Y suggests that work is as natural as play, and people do enjoy work and are motivated by, achievement and goal setting and the things that happen at work. So Theory X means people need to be pushed, right? Carrot and stick. Theory Y suggests that people have internal motivation for work. Work is as natural as play. And so I've always been a Theory Y guy. I believe people are not inherently lazy. I do believe that people do have motivations. You just have to sort of tap into whatever triggers that motivation to be successful and point that effort towards your organizational goals.
You've told us a little bit about the TD Foundation and its roots and part of the kinds of work that it does today. But I have to pause for a moment and say full disclosure that our Code of Support Foundation is a strong partner with the TD Foundation, or I should say you are a strong partner of Code of Support Foundation. And that's a little bit different, but would you tell us how you see yourselves in your foundation interacting and supporting other organizations like ours?
We are all volunteer, right? We run 3 or 4 events that raise money, but we don't have any operations. We don't have any caseworkers. We don't have any advocates. We don't have staff. Like, we're all volunteers. So we really are centered around driving this money and then establishing the right partners. So in many ways, we almost act as a financial resource to our partners. And you've mentioned it, Code of Support is a partner. America's Warrior Partnership, Wounded Veteran Family. You've got SOCOM Care Coalition, the Station, the Boulder Crest groups. So you might have these broader organizations. Oh, and Gold Star Teen Adventures is a big partner of ours as well. I shouldn't hesitate to mention them. So they might have a broader mission, but they might get a case that fits our specific mission. And our mission has always been the children of the wounded warriors or the Gold Star kids. So take an organization like Code of Support that provides a myriad of services on a broader mission, including the incredible Patriot Link that hooks people up to appropriate partners. You might come across a case, and if there's a child under 18 and it's odd, right? Like, it's not like it's covered by somebody else, like it's not education-based or whatever it is, that's how we work. So people bring us cases and they say, hey, here we have a situation. Can you help with this situation? And Alan, it's all the kind of stuff that gets rejected. Like, we do pay a lot of medical bills that TRICARE has rejected, or we have like, we bought a septic tank once. The guy sets up a new house and he can't move into the house until he has a certified septic tank. Car repairs, we pay a lot of utilities, we pay a lot of mortgages, and we pay a lot of rent. So we do a lot of work around preventing veteran homelessness. We pick up a lot of educational costs, right? So if you think about the kind of people we're helping, you might have a soldier that's banged up and the wife is full-time taking care of him and trying to raise 2 kids. So they're living at or right below the poverty level. And if some unanticipated or unexpected cost comes up, they don't have $100. They don't have $200. So, we've bought Chromebooks, laptops. We've bought clothing for kids to be able to go to the first day of school and be just like all the other kids. But yeah, a lot of auto repairs, a lot of medical bills that people won't pay for. Or I'll give you one more example, then I'll turn it back over to you. But someone comes to you with a case and they say, hey, I got this recently medically retired airborne ranger, 2-time Purple Heart, medically retired. His baby was just born premature. The baby's in the NICU, and the NICU is 100 miles away. Okay, but maybe TRICARE picks up the NICU cost, but who's paying for the hotel and the gas and the food? And who's paying for the babysitter for the other 2 kids that stay at home while mom and dad are checking on the baby in the NICU for the next 6 weeks? Well, those bills add up. And if you're on a fixed income or haven't quite transitioned out of the military to a civilian job, they don't have $2,000. Well, that's where Code of Support or SOCOM Care Coalition or Wounded Veteran Family Care or others like us step in and help these families that are in crisis.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the private sector, is that we don't have to apply the same rules that government does. We get to establish our own rules, and even when it makes sense, break our own rules. But the point is, we can get the job done, and we're so proud and happy to have been able to team with you for some of these things that otherwise just fall through the cracks.
No, and that's, I think that's our specialty, right? Like no red tape. Well, you guys do the vetting, so I know you guys have some processes and procedures, but once a case is put in front of us, sometimes we're funding it that exact same day. Like I think about the number of times I've had to drop what I'm doing and call a bank or wire money to somebody to prevent someone from being kicked out of their house or their car being repossessed. But it's like there's a girl that had developmental issues, but as she got older, the father couldn't, because he had his own injuries, carry her up the stairs. So we bought one of those sliding chairs. I don't even know what they're called, that goes up and down the stairs. Like, yeah. Who would cover that? Like, that's where I think folks like you and I specialize in those cases where we just fulfill the need. It doesn't have to fit in a bucket. If there's a child of a wounded warrior or a Gold Star family, TD Foundation will help them.
You mentioned SOCOM, which is Special Operations Command Care Coalition. You play a very different role with them too, I think, and similar to what you have personally done with the Wounded Warrior Project as a mentor. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I got to launch school, I was out of it, right? Drugged up and banged up, in and out of consciousness, and I remember looking up, and this guy's like, my name is Sergeant whoever. And he goes, I'm with SOCOM. And I'm with the SOCOM Care Coalition, and we're going to take care of you. I'm about to get emotional, and I didn't know at the time but what they meant, but there was a special group set up to take care of special operations soldiers that were injured in combat, and it was called the Care Coalition. And they, all during the time that I was at Walter Reed, they took care of me, they took care of my family. And then they set up a mentor program, a peer-to-peer mentor program. So from like 2008 to 2011, 2012, I was involved with the Care Coalition as a peer mentor. And I mentored 4 other people that had similar injuries or similar situations to mine. And I'm still in touch with 3 of those 4 folks. And it was a very rewarding experience. We did do a lot of different training and all of that. And they have obviously their professional advocates, but they assigned these peer mentors as well. And so I was involved with them in that way. Yeah. Very rewarding experience.
Well, there's so many sides of you to explore, Tom. I can't resist asking you to relate a little anecdote about a trip to China that you took in 2009. And that kind of changed your life forever as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a good decision and a bad decision in that, so what Alan's referring to is my engagement. So my first wife left me when I was in Walter Reed in a wheelchair. And maybe that's another time for a different podcast and a different time and story. But so I get back to New York, I'm injured, I'm divorced, I'm feeling like damaged goods. And, but I got an eHarmony, and I met my wife, and immediately we started dating, getting along well, like she lived out on Long Island, I was in New York City. We started spending every weekend together. And pretty soon I decided that this was who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And so just after we'd been dating about a year, I planned this big trip because I thought, man, I want to go somewhere special that we can revisit. She doesn't love to travel, and China's like a 16-hour flight. So I don't know what I was thinking, but to your point, I got a ring. We went to China, and I think it was the 3rd day that we were there. We were on the Great Wall of China. So I wait till she turned to look out over the wall. And when she turned back around, I was on my knee, and I asked her if she would be my wife. Yeah.
Obviously, she said yes. Today you have 3 kids, 3 sons, I guess it is. As a final thing, any thoughts you'd care to share on parenting versus leadership and your styles of those?
It's funny. I think I'm maybe a better leader than a parent. I think that, there's so many parenting advice out there. The hardest part for me for being a parent is making my kids struggle. I'm a big proponent of grit, and I've become a bit of an acolyte of the work that Angela Duckworth did. And anyone that's listening to this, if you have not seen her TED Talk or read her book, Grit, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. But it's like you have to allow people to fail. And I think that's the thing I struggle with most as a parent, right? Like letting my kids struggle and fail and letting them know that it's okay, and then coaching them on what to do when you fall short or when you do fail. And I think that does create some parallels in leadership, because some people do struggle with delegation or allowing folks to be given challenges that might be a little above what their level is, but give them a chance, and delegate and coach, but don't do the work for them. And so I can be a bit of I guess 20 years ago, they were helicopter parents, and now we have snow plow parents, where you push all of the obstacles out of the way. And so I do struggle with that. I'm trying to do a better job of letting my kids fend for themselves and giving them chances to strive for things that are a little above what they can do, let them fail, and then coach them through what to do when those things happen. Because I think that if you don't do that and you shelter them or do too much for them, you're not preparing them for what life can be like.
Well, that's a great note to close on. And Tom, I really want to thank you for sharing your stories with us today. And I'm sure our readers and viewers and listeners, whatever, share my view that you are a terrific role model for selfless service, for leadership, and for philanthropy. Thank you for your service to our nation, your personal sacrifice, and your continuing leadership into helping make this world truly a better place. Thanks, Tom.
I'm honored, Alan, and obviously I'm just trying to live up to the standard that you've set, and I appreciate you having me as your first guest.
This podcast is powered by and copyright of the Coda Support Foundation. Coda Support Presents Profiles in Service is hosted by Major General Alan B. Salisbury and produced by Carly Van Tassel. The opinions of the guests on the show do not directly reflect the stance of the Coda Support Foundation. To learn more about Coda Support, please visit www.codasupport.org or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Finally, if you or someone you know is a service member, veteran, caregiver, or military family member in need of assistance, please visit codasupport.org/get-help or create a free account at patriotlink.org.